let's look at the Trump family right now. Don Jr. is clearly the one out there championing the technology. I listened to him on a Twitter Spaces recently. He actually understands, maybe it's not Bitcoin specific yet in his head, but he understands what the power of Bitcoin, he thinks it's crypto, but what the power of Bitcoin is and why it matters. And so he's the one driving that conversation forward. And so you always will find someone that's like one step removed from a federal regulator or someone running for president that is the one driving the conversation, because who are they going to trust, right? How do you trust what people are telling you when you're shooting to be one of the most powerful people in the world, and they know that by impacting your views on something that they can dramatically improve their own situation? So you have to sort of lean on your family members when it comes to issues that are critical like Bitcoin, and especially when it comes to changing your mind on something.
Imagine a world where Bitcoin doesn't just exist in the margins, but is championed at the highest levels of policymaking across the globe. Today, we dive deep into the story of the Satoshi Action Fund, a nonprofit navigating the uncharted waters to build real political momentum for Bitcoin, even when the odds seemed totally stacked against it. The Satoshi Action Fund has actually already helped pass Bitcoin-related laws in 4 states, with policy initiatives introduced in 20 more. But can Bitcoin's benefits actually bridge political divides? Is there a way to frame Bitcoin so that lawmakers across the spectrum find value in it? In this episode, you'll learn about the Satoshi Action Fund's strategic approach, modeled after the cannabis industry's state-by-state advocacy campaign, to win support from both red and blue states. Can this grassroots effort bring Bitcoin into mainstream policy? And what happens when family ties, as seen with lawmakers like Cynthia Lummis and Donald Trump, bring Bitcoin into their inner circles of power? Join us as we unpack how Dennis Porter is forging unexpected alliances, reshaping policy, and paving the way for a world where Bitcoin's potential might actually be fully realized. But before we do that, I want to introduce our sponsors, Stampseed, the Orange Pill app, and Swan. Our partners are businesses and people that we respect, and our products that we at Bit Intelligence personally use. You're watching 21 Voices.
So Satoshi Action Fund officially started in June of 2022. We got to work right away trying to raise money, of course, as a nonprofit, but it was in the middle of the bear market. FTX was collapsing, and so it's very difficult to be able to raise any money for a new startup nonprofit from who once was, myself, a Twitter and YouTube and podcast influencer with perceivably no real political experience that could earn me the right, or the responsibility to go represent the Bitcoin community. So the very first thing that we did, I told my team, I said, listen, nobody's going to give us money if we haven't produced results. We've passed law in 4 states total now, Oklahoma, Louisiana, Montana, and Arkansas. And we've also introduced policy in up to 20 states. And I know we're in a really good position to be able to produce results for Bitcoin in the policy front. So at the core of Satoshi Action is proof of work. At the core of my motivation was really to protect my own access to the technology. I talked to a lot of different people who had that same exact fear that there could be some type of government intervention or attack on Bitcoin that would prevent our ability to self-custody the asset. Our strategy is very much like the cannabis industry, where they pursued the approach to talk to state lawmakers and regulators and to educate them on the benefits of why that state should allow the cannabis industry to exist. So for cannabis, of course, the biggest thing is tax revenue. There's an incredible amount of tax revenue generated from the cannabis industry. But of course, there are other benefits, like reduced crime, increased property values. And those pitches, when they said, hey, these are why you should allow this industry to exist in your state, that worked for lawmakers. They really liked that. It was very appealing. And so we take that same exact approach at Satoshi Action when we go talk to lawmakers and regulators about why they should allow Bitcoin to exist and why they should encourage its growth in the state. We share the benefits of the technology. So everything from balancing the grid to enhancing renewable energy to providing people a stable form of savings. And these are all things that lawmakers like. And they think they're things that lawmakers know people need, right? They know they need to balance their grid. And in states like Oregon, where they want to achieve 50% renewables by 2040, they know they need something to help them to accomplish this. And in fact, when I was sitting down with a lawmaker today, and many lawmakers before, they are constantly worried about how they can help grow the renewable energy sector because it faces a lot of problems. And when we come to them and we share with them how Bitcoin mining can monetize every single extra watt of power that is generated by renewable energy, they get very excited. So I think a lot of times people think like, we should pitch Bitcoin in the way that I understand it, but it's more important to pitch Bitcoin in a way where they will understand the value of it as a person and as an individual, but also for their jurisdiction and for their state. You can frame Bitcoin in a way that aligns with virtually anybody's viewpoints. There are so many things about Bitcoin that so many different people from so many different political perspectives can appreciate, that once you're able to sit down with them and help them understand the technology, they tend to be receptive. Now, we've, of course, started in a lot of red states where I think there is a lower barrier to entry. I talked about getting the opportunity to sit down with lawmakers and talk to them about Bitcoin, and we've had better opportunities to do that in red states. But as time goes on, that is starting to change, and we're seeing more purple states and more blue states be interested in introducing our legislation and having conversations around how Bitcoin can help that state. I think something that's really important for people to understand about Bitcoin and why there's so many right-leaning voices in the Bitcoin ecosystem is because libertarians were the first to latch on to Bitcoin, and they started to go out and have conversations with their friends and family members and started to profess Bitcoin in a way that was in alignment with their worldviews. Well, their worldviews are actually very close to a lot of the views of where Republicans are at right now. And so that's why, in my opinion, you see a lot of libertarians and then immediately you see Republicans latching onto the technology because they're the ones having conversations with each other. Just today, it just so happens that libertarians and Democrats don't talk a lot. Although I talk to a lot of Democrats who say they have a lot of libertarian leanings, the political parties, they don't talk to each other. But that's starting to shift. As people like myself and others in the ecosystem go out and intentionally try to have conversations with progressives and Democrats, you're going to see more and more of them understand the value of Bitcoin and why they support Bitcoin and why they believe that it should be something that their state and nation should pursue. The Republicans that are the most supportive of Bitcoin today, the most vocal and outspoken, a lot of them, when I speak to them, it was a factor of someone very close to them, either a close friend or a family member that, orange pilled them, so to speak, right? And got them on board with the technology. Because one thing that people should understand, especially about very high-ranking federal officials, is you could be the greatest speaker, you could be the Michael Saylor of Bitcoin, but if they don't know you, they're not going to trust you. They could watch a million Bitcoin podcasts and YouTube channels and interviews about Bitcoin where it aligns with their worldview. But because these, especially federal lawmakers, are constantly being inundated with new information and so many different issues, everything from, the multiple wars that our country is involved in, to the homeless crisis, to the housing crisis, to the border crisis, to the healthcare crisis. There's a lot of crises going on. And so trying to compete for not only for their attention, but also for their interest in changing their opinion on something is very difficult. But they have family members, they have close allies, they have trusted people within their circle that they can go to. And if a trusted person or a family member within their circle says, hey, you should take a look at Bitcoin and this is why, that's very impactful. And so that is what we have seen. Let's take Senator Lummis, for example. Her son-in-law was the one who got her to be very pro-Bitcoin. Let's look at the Trump family right now. Don Jr. is clearly the one out there championing the technology. I listened to him on a Twitter Spaces recently. He actually understands, maybe it's not Bitcoin specific yet in his head, but he understands what the power of Bitcoin, he thinks it's crypto, but what the power of Bitcoin is and why it matters. And so he's the one driving that conversation forward. And so you always will find someone that's one step removed from a federal regulator or someone running for president that is the one driving the conversation, because who are they going to trust, right? How do you trust what people are telling you when you're shooting to be one of the most powerful people in the world, and they know that by impacting your views on something that they can dramatically improve their own situation? So you have to sort of lean on your family members when it comes to issues that are critical like Bitcoin, and especially when it comes to changing your mind on something. I try to stay away from these presidential elections and rooting for someone or reporting on what they're doing, because first of all, they're already getting tons of coverage. And second of all, the moment you start trying to help a candidate along, everyone's like, oh, you're in with them. Well, I don't want anything to do with you. And so I try to just provide general support from the bottom up. Anybody who wants to learn more about Bitcoin, anybody who wants to learn more about how Bitcoin mining can help their energy system, anybody who is interested in, the research or the policy, we provide ourselves as a resource.
Please bear with us for a quick message from our sponsors. These videos take a lot of time to make, and we've partnered with brands we trust like Stampseed and the Orange Pill app in order to get the funding we need to bring you these videos every week. Don't store your Bitcoin in cold storage without stamping your seed phrase on an indestructible titanium plate. Stamp seed is fireproof, rust-proof, impact-proof, and easy to hide. It has no loose parts and will give you ultimate peace of mind that your Bitcoin is safe and sound for the long term. Click the link in the description below for 15% off your stamping kit. When I finally got Bitcoin, it hit me like a lightning bolt. It was the currency of the future, the only money that truly mattered. But there was a problem. I didn't know anyone else that thought like me. That is until I discovered the Orange Pill app. Suddenly, I was connected with a network of like-minded Bitcoin enthusiasts, right in my own city. The Orange Pill app is more than just a social network. It's a community of passionate individuals determined to change the world, one Satoshi at a time. This series is brought to you by Swan and created by Bit Intelligence. Remember to like this video and subscribe to both our channels for more videos like this every week. Thanks for watching.
I think that Bitcoin is a really powerful tool for bringing people together. I think it creates a lot of unity amongst people who typically wouldn't speak to each other. My organization is made up of Libertarians, Republicans, Democrats, progressives, conservatives, and we're all working together because we believe in Bitcoin. I don't think you would find that, especially not in the political realm, right? Of course, that you might go work for a corporate entity that has people from across the political spectrum, but usually when you have a political group, someone that's very political like us, there's just not very many technologies or issue areas where you're going to see a lot of bipartisan, or oftentimes people like to call it nonpartisan, right? Because you have the left, the right, the middle, libertarians, conservatives, progressives, all working together to advance Bitcoin. Now, I think we will enter an era where we'll have a lot more debate around how we use Bitcoin. Today, we're debating over whether or not we should use Bitcoin, but it's critical that we get to a world that we start debating over how we use Bitcoin, because at least in that environment, we're always advancing Bitcoin. But at the end of the day, you're talking about how we should allow a technology access energy. You're not talking about where should we send the tax money to, which I think does create a lot of divide. In fact, there's an argument to be made around the fiat system that this ability to extract value from the money or through taxation and distribute it to different groups, most likely groups that you align with, is what causes a lot of the divide in this country and across the world. And it is why we fight so hard and ruthlessly, definitely see violence picking up around the United States when it comes to who wins that most important, most coveted presidential office, because the amount you can gain from winning that office. Now, I have friends all around me saying, this is my next job. I'm waiting to get my next job. I'm waiting to get, the funding to come towards the thing that I care about, because when, my side wins, I get money. And that's causing a lot of political divide, I think, in this country, because you're seeing the ability to use that unlimited money printer to advance your own team's goals. I have this evolving conversation with Bitcoiners right now where I'm trying to convince them that regulation can be good. Regulation is really important for helping investors to feel confident in a marketplace. Without rules of the road or regulations that help to shape where investors can place their capital, they tend to wait on the sidelines. Regulations are akin to, opening up and operating a freeway. When you open the freeway up, you don't just allow people to drive at any speed limit. You don't say, you can drive 5 miles an hour and you can drive 120 miles an hour. You'll see accidents all over the place. And so smart regulation is, okay, what's a good speed, high speed that we can all drive at together and we can get to where we want to go to safely and on time. That is very similar to what we're going to need to see in the Bitcoin space. I don't think we have really put in the thought process. We haven't taken the time to understand what types of regulations will truly be able to advance Bitcoin, but we need to be thinking about it in that lens. How can regulation help us all get to where we want to go safely, effectively, and efficiently? How is Bitcoin viewed? Is it viewed as a commodity? Is it viewed as a security? Like, those types of regulations will certainly change the trajectory for Bitcoin. And everyone says, it's more like a commodity, which is true. It is definitely more like a commodity, but we haven't really even got to the point where we have those classifications in place. And so oftentimes investors will wait on the sidelines until we see those classifications be clarified. And even if they're not 100% perfect, it's just good to have them nailed down and put in place so that people can start making decisions around a technology where they know it's going to be consistent. And that's a really important part of regulation too, is having consistent regulations throughout time. And it's also why it's important to take time creating those regulations, because you want to be able to create regulations that can last for the long haul. If you're creating regulations and changing them every 2 years, that's another big problem for investors. And we want to see more investors come into this ecosystem, and that will happen through clear, stable, reliable regulations. So in my home state of Oregon, which I have been waiting to pursue as an opportunity for some time to be able to have conversations with lawmakers, I have finally started to engage lawmakers here in the state, and in a very short time, we will see a bill introduced here in the state of Oregon that is going to protect the right to self-custody and the right to run a node and the right to have peer-to-peer transactions. Now, whether or not that bill will be passing the law will be a factor of the other conversations we can have. So what'll be our first state where we have a full bill being introduced in a fully blue state. I have been trying for a long time to convince folks that Bitcoin is bipartisan and that both sides can be on board with Bitcoin. And a lot of people don't believe me or don't think that it's true. They think that Democrats are a lost cause when it comes to Bitcoin. But there are so many things about Bitcoin that those on the left and Democrats and progressives can appreciate, right? Because anytime we're able to sit down with someone and they have an open mind, and there's a warm introduction to understand Bitcoin, they grasp it very quickly. They grasp very quickly, that they misjudged the technology. They grasp very quickly that they may have the wrong perception of Bitcoin. And so I feel very optimistic about a lot of these blue states starting to understand Bitcoin and then trying to protect it and also to attract the industry to their borders. The users govern the technology. So in a way, there is a collective, and I think that's a term that might trigger some, but there is a collective of people, operating, running, managing Bitcoin together. And that is something that's very appealing to folks on the left. Beyond that, Bitcoin mining is very good for advancing renewable energy and for enhancing our energy grid and helping in the energy transition. And so I'm very excited that we have the opportunity here in Oregon to introduce this bill, because I think it really challenges the narrative that, oh, this is just a right-leaning issue. Oh, this is just a libertarian issue. No, it's an issue for everyone. Everyone is going to find something about Bitcoin that they appreciate and that they're going to want to advance in their state. So for Republicans, that'll be freedom money and reducing the size and scope of the federal government, and for having a stricter monetary policy. But for those on the left, there's just really an endless number of issues that Bitcoin helps to evolve. Specifically, I think the one that is really, really critical is this idea that Bitcoin is truly inclusive as a monetary system, and that you can't discriminate against someone based on their age, sex, sexual orientation, gender expression, religion, political affiliation, or where they were born, or the color of their skin. There's no monetary system like that today, and yet, except until Bitcoin came along. I sometimes think that Bitcoin makes left progressive ideas feasible, because a lot of it's only feasible through government mandates. And then you get the right raising up against that because they don't want to be forced to do anything. But Bitcoin accomplishes those goals without forcing the right to comply.
It's clear that Bitcoin advocacy isn't just about passing policies. It's about sparking a revolution. The Satoshi Action Fund, led by Dennis Porter, has evolved from tackling a tough US market to capturing the attention of international leaders, each curious about Bitcoin's potential as a strategic reserve. Imagine leaders from around the globe dialing in, wanting to learn how Bitcoin could secure their nation's financial future. This movement is unfolding in real time, transforming how international policymakers view the value of Bitcoin beyond borders and ideologies. So will Bitcoin become a global strategic reserve? Only time will tell. But one thing is certain: the world is watching, and the call for Bitcoin has never been louder. If you want to learn more about Bitcoin and how it will demonetize real estate, bringing housing costs back to realistic prices for the average person, watch this next video here. Don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to our channel for more videos like this every week. Thanks for watching.